This is my collection of gouges and chisels, but because of the size, only a few of them we'll be using. I should have gone through the equipment we use to make the spars and masts. This is the Sherline long bed lathe that I've been using. Had her for many years, and she really provides yeoman service. As I showed before, there are really just a few of the chisels that I use. One gouge, although the truth is I hardly ever do use it. And most important, I have two followers. This one, which you've seen before, which fits on the track, and the other one, which is perhaps more important, and one that I just discovered because I thought I had one, couldn't find it, and then eventually it turned up. This one fits onto the car, and so it moves with the work, and it keeps a positive pressure on the piece at all times so that there's no bending. And the only negative is that it needs a relatively pre-finished stock for it to work. So you couldn't use it on a section that is square, meaning that the best thing to do is to take the plane and round it off as much as possible. To install the follower, you simply attach it to the saddle. It takes an Allen key, and it's not on the slide, it's attached to the saddle. So as you move the slide in and out, the follower stays exactly where it is. And that allows you to keep pressure on the piece no matter if you're using the post or one of the hand chisels to reduce the size of the stock. And then there's this little plane that I got from Lee Valley some years ago, and it really is a superb little plane. Here is the balance of the stock. Some a little bit oversized, but we will take them down on the lathe so it really wouldn't matter. When the work is all completed, this is what they will look like. We're not going to go through the details of tapering each piece. That makes no sense and is adequately covered in the previous video, video 21. So we're just going to give you a quick overview. As you can see, I am using the steady rest because when this video was done for the foremast, I didn't have the follower. I couldn't find it at the time. And the piece was fairly big, so it was not a problem for me to use it. It's only when the pieces get very small and very thin that the only tool that you can do to keep the piece from bending is in fact to have the follower. With these very small pieces, it's going to be much easier to machine them going to the gouges, and in my case I use these very small chisels which give me great control over the piece. The making of the top gallant is relatively simple. You need a piece of stock that is wider than 5 millimeters, and it starts with a 5 millimeter end and goes all the way down to 4 millimeters, and when completed this is what it would look like. So the first thing we need to do is round these pieces off so that it's much easier to machine on the lathe. And that's really just taking my Lee Valley plane and taking off the edges. And before you do that, remember to make the center point in the square section so that if you have to flip anything around, you have the established center point, because it's very difficult to find it when you've rounded off the piece. This gives me a fairly easy task of now taking the edge off the square section and preparing a rough round for machining. Sherline has this accessory that allows you to set the edge of the cutting bit. It's very simple to do. Just back off the screws, the Allen screws, on the tool post. Align the edge of the tip under the height adjustment and tighten back. Once that is done, you take the tool post and put it in the saddle by simply tightening up the Allen key screw. Then on the follower, back off the Allen keys and adjust, holding them very gently against the piece of wood so that you're not distorting it. And now we've got a piece of stock that is above what we need to cut it down to the final cut, but is even right through the entire length of the piece. This is the 4 staysail boom. So the next thing we do is, using a template, or you can just take it off the plan, we mark off the key areas that we want to machine. And I like to use my chisels to bring these down to the various heights. This is the center, and these are the two ends. In the case of the forward staysail boom, this is at 5 millimeters, is at 4 millimeters, this area is at 3 millimeters, and eventually we'll take this end down to 2 millimeters, but we're going to leave that for last. The other thing that's important is, if it is at all possible, you do not want to take the piece out and switch it around, because the way the piece is held, when you flip it around, it's not going to fit exactly, and you're going to tend to get some wobbling. So a lot of planning should go to try and make sure that once you fit the piece on the lathe, that you don't take it out again. So using the tool rest, we take down the center and the two ends, which are the 3 areas I'm going to use to taper, starting normally from the center and moving towards each end. Now the stock is ready for transitioning, and we're going from 5 down to 4, so only 1 millimeter on this side, and from here we're going from 5 down to 3. I've developed a technique using the tool post and cutting bit, replacing the steady rest, where I move the cutting bit in or out depending on which end I'm coming from, and I am able to get a pretty good taper doing it this way. We're all set up, reinstalled the cutting piece, the support is in place, and we're going to slowly turn down to transition 1 millimeter from here to here. As the cutting bit moves to the right, you'll notice that I'm turning the cutting wheel in very slightly all the time, and that allows me to develop the taper. So that's beautifully transitioned down. Now we're going to do the same thing on the other side, except we're going from 5 down to 2. Again, it's the same technique, except that I am moving the cutting bit in a little more quickly than I did on the other side. Now we're going to take the final piece down to 2 millimeters. I prefer using the steady rest for these small reductions in size, simply because it's very easy to operate. It's easy to measure with the caliper. You can go in and out without too much trouble, because you will find that you're going to be turning the machine on and off many times until you get close to the final diameter that you want. And the piece is now complete. Just need to fix the end. Now to do that, you need to establish a center line. And you go straight over. And then sand these two pieces down. Proxon pen sander does a fabulous job again. It's really nice to get all of these pieces all done for both boats. So now that's all left to do is to install the top gaff on the three pieces and put on the various fittings as dictated to by the plan. Now it's time to make up the gaff rigs. We have the spanker gaff, foremast spanker gaff, and the main spanker gaff that's attached to the boom. These jaws, we've stuck some photocopies onto some 5mm board for the jaws and some 2mm board for the bibs. We've cut them out on the bandsaw, and we immediately have a problem that the tapered piece, when you fit it based on the way the gaff jaw is supposed to be cut, it's quite clear that something is wrong. And I think the first thing, which I'm not going to remake, is that the gaff jaw is probably correct, but the end, the tapered end, probably shouldn't have been reduced at all, as is shown on the drawing. So that can be fixed by redoing these and making them tighter. The second thing is that they're quite a bit longer. The instruction makes reference to a distance of 2.5 centimeters, when in fact it's probably 2.1 centimeter. So that's not a big problem. We can fix that quite easily, and I'm really not too concerned when I recut. And then the second error that I had is when I first made the cutout so that the gaff jaw could fit on the mast, I had made it much too small and I had reduced the outside. So with the second one I didn't make that mistake, and that really fit perfectly. So to solve this problem, I have this little piece that has a series of different size holes, and I quickly determine the size hole that fits the mast, and then I'll make sure that I put that size hole onto the piece, and then cut the hole to suit the size mast exactly where it's going to fit. And I'm also going to make all the adjustments before I stick this onto the boom. Back outside to the Proxon bandsaw, and it really wasn't too much of a problem to redo the piece. Now that that's all done, we can check, and here is the boom gaff jaw that fits absolutely perfectly on the mast. And if we turn around and look at the spanker gaff jaw, you'll see that it also fits perfectly on the mast. So now we can stick it with no risk of there being an issue. Here we have the three pieces refitted. The main mast spanker boom, which is the main boom. And you can see we've got a nice tight fit. The main mast spanker gaff, a nice tight fit, and finally the foremast spanker gaff. Now we'll just mix up some epoxy and stick these pieces. They're now stuck and completed, and I'm still not 100% happy with them. The pieces were 5mm in thickness, yet the edge of all of these were 4mm. So what that means is you're going to have to take the gaff jaw quite a bit down, and you may see it here. We've taken it down. My feeling is it still has to come down quite a bit more, so that the boom center, you should see it protruding slightly up. Again, this is not explained in great detail, although this little diagram here does show you clearly how it's going to be rigged. The other problem that we had is this little ring here, which is number 102, which is the spanker boom base ring. We think it's going in the wrong direction. and I've installed the first one like that. However, that makes no sense because the spanker main boom is going to be at an angle like this. So it actually should be the exact opposite of that, so that it sits flush on top of it. And when you look at most of the pictures of boats, that's the type of arrangement that you would see. That the jaw and this ring should be roughly parallel to each other. So I'm quite sure that that's an error on the plan, and I'm going to treat it as such. Of course, I've already done this one, so I'm going to have to grind the bibs off and reverse them. Well, that's not a big problem. The other little challenge I had is the top gallant, the end of it, ends at 5 millimeters, but the main mast caps, which are these two fellas here, the hole is at 4 millimeters, and if I try to use the parts supplied, it gets really very thin on the side here. So I've taken the top gallant down a bit and made some custom made main mast caps. So again, lots of little inconsistencies, and this is where the kit falls down because it's not explaining these things properly and leaving a lot to your judgment. And here she is fitted, and the boom in its position should be roughly about there. We've gone way over my time allowance for these videos, so I'm going to bring this for an end, and we'll pick it up in the next video. We're coming close to the end now, so thanks for your patience and keep modeling.